The cosmic significance of art is that you are building stable structures across the multiverse, which other beings can build upon and which must be referred to in order to explain reality. You've just missed this somehow. We've been caught by this idea that art is this frivolous thing, it's kind of this guilty pleasure that we may have. You've never understood that you could appreciate art in a deeper way, which leads to human progress. Your position is understandable. You don't understand the fabric of reality. You don't understand the four strands. You don't understand how they're related. You don't understand how that's related to art. It makes a lot of sense. We can help you out a little bit here.
This is how beauty shapes reality.
We have four strands of the fabric of reality. They are physics. This is like quantum physics, entropy, that kind of thing. We've got computation. This is as described by Turing, the ideas of a universal computer. We have a theory of knowledge, which was introduced by Karl Popper. This is essentially guessing and checking, and that's how knowledge is created. And then we have neo-Darwinism, as described by Richard Dawkins. This is evolution by natural selection. I always wonder why we don't just call it evolution by mutation, because if you look at any individual, then their entire lineage would just be mutations. The selection would be invisible. Anyway, variation and selection, biology, evolution. So all of these four things are interesting individually, but they all relate together into this one thing. I don't know what the one thing would be called, reality. They kind of come together into this one thing. And if you understand them all together, you understand a lot more things about reality and art. So I want to go very specifically one by one on how each of these things are related to each other so that nothing is missed, and then relate it all to art. So we're going to start with physics and computation. This is going to be a foundation of a lot of things. I guess a lot of them are just the foundation of a lot of things. Don't listen to me say anything about foundations. They're all super related. Physics and computation are very important together because physics can be computed. And that is an interesting fact about the world. It doesn't have to be that way, but it is that way, and things can be computed. So that is a very relevant thing to understand. And just knowing that it is possible to compute reality or physics, the laws of physics, that's important. The next thing is that the structure of the multiverse is actually dependent on information. Uh, the way that information moves, it defines the way that the multiverse is set up. So that gets rid of the whole notion of reductionism, because the what we might think of as the lowest part of reality, the foundation of physics, is actually dependent on other information. I should say that we're talking about physics here, we're saying quantum physics, and I'm talking about the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics as described by Hugh Everett. I don't think I said that in the beginning. And all of the different, they're different worlds. The many worlds are arranged in a particular way, and the way that they're arranged is dependent on computation and information flow. The next one is physics and evolution. Now, this is very important because of what I just said a second ago. The structure of the multiverse is dependent on information. Information generated by evolution changes how the structure of the universe is. So that's fairly important. And also, evolution kind of happens really because of entropy. If we were to say that there is a directionality for evolution, we might say that the directionality is for information to be more faithfully stored and more faithfully transferred. However, there are just physical limits for this. You can't store information very faithfully for a very long time. You can't transfer information very well, very faithfully. So there's always going to be these mutations due to entropy. And because of those mutations, you need something to check and make sure that things are not mutated, or at least that they meet some standard. So when that happens, you get the variation from the mutations and the entropy, and then you select for things that meet the standard, and you lead to progress, and that is evolution. I just described evolution for you. That's because of physics. The next is physics and epistemology, and I mean to say knowledge here. Physics and knowledge creation is very similar to evolution. Knowledge is not able to be held stably. information is not able to be held stably, so it gets shaken up, and then you can improve it. It's the same idea of guessing and checking, or the same idea of variation and selection. It's very similar to guessing and checking. But the important thing is that knowledge is hard to vary. And since knowledge is hard to vary across the multiverse, across the variations of different multiverses and all the entropy, you get what is um, colloquially referred to as a crystal, knowledge being a crystal, because the knowledge will be the same across multiple universes. Let me explain here. If something is difficult to change and there's a standard to check and make sure that it reaches a certain standard, then that means under different circumstances, under slightly different circumstances in different universes, they will all converge towards the same thing. I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but I'll give a simple type of example here. If I say something like A equals MC squared, some people are going to be thinking something specific when I say that. If I say E equals MC cubed, you're also going to be thinking something specific. And if I say E equals MC squared, obviously you're going to be thinking of that. So all those different things, I'm saying different things, but in different universes, they all converge to the same thing. In your mind, they're going to converge into the same thing in different people's mind. And it doesn't matter what I say, if I say something that's similar to that, it'll converge in your mind. Now, if I say Gaji Beri Bimba or Raji Ledi Kinta or Mami Peri Pinta, if I say something like that, imagine I'm saying each of those things in different universes. When you hear it in your mind, it's not going to converge to something specific. You're just going to hear what I say. You might just be confused. You're just going to hear what I said and probably remember something close to what I said, but not exactly what I said. And they're going to be different in every universe. So things do not converge in all of the universes. But when you have something that is intelligible and knowledge, you will converge in all these universes. Now, that's just an analogy. It doesn't really work linguistically. I don't think it really works linguistically, but that's just a simple illustration of how knowledge is going to be converging in multiple universes as all the universes are changing. So that's how physics relates to all the strands. All right, the next is knowledge and evolution. These two are extremely similar. So, what I was just speaking about, physics has a tendency for everything to differentiate. All of the universes are going to be different in different ways because of entropy. Things are just happening and they're just happening. Things are just happening everywhere and they're going to be differentiate. Every single different universe is going to be differentiating. Every part of the universe and within a universe is going to be differentiating. And there's one way for that to not happen, which is knowledge creation. And that also includes evolution and human knowledge creation, epistemology. They make the universes more similar. And there are a lot of other similarities of evolution, the knowledge that is created through evolution and the knowledge that is created from human thoughts. There are a lot of similarities. We're just going to couch them all under the term Lamarckism because that is so interesting to me. We'll get into that another time about why Lamarckism is wrong and how Lamarckism is generally applied to knowledge generation, generally speaking. That's a whole rabbit hole. A whole other day, we'll get into that. Suffice to say that there's a lot of similarities in the errors that we think of evolution and how we think about knowledge. So that's the connection between knowledge creation and evolution. They're very similar processes. Knowledge creation and computation are related because, well, we can know things. Humans can compute. Humans can compute things. Everything that's computable is computable by humans. You understand the Turing principle. Everything that is computable by any computer is computable by the universal Turing machine, and a human can simulate the universal Turing machine. That's pretty simple. So we can understand all things that are computable, we can compute, which just means that humans can understand anything that is computable. And I don't know if I said this before, but physics is computable. So humans can understand anything that is physically possible to happen. That's the connection there. With It's also relevant to understand that the way that knowledge is generated, um, you never get to a point where you're exactly representing reality directly. And even if you did exactly represent reality directly. It wouldn't be stable because of entropy. So there's always going to be this variation and changing. You'll always be able to update. Essentially, you'll always be able to improve your calculations of reality, and that means that human knowledge will always be able to improve, and that means that you have an infinite improving, infinite knowledge growth, the possibility of infinite knowledge growth. Another connection between knowledge and computation is that since everything in the universe can be computed, that also means that the human mind can be computed, or the process that generates knowledge can be computed. So you can have other beings, you can have other you can have computers that have human knowledge. You can have computers that are generalized intelligences. You can make AGI. That's what I'm trying to say. And the final thing, the final two strains that I haven't related yet, is evolution and computation. This one is just kind of a question mark, really. The fact that evolution somehow created a being, humans, hello, that's us, that had universal computation. That's just an interesting fact, and somehow that happened. And it actually didn't happen in humans, it happened pre-human, but we are the ones who enjoy the results of that, and no other animal does. That's how the 4 strands are related to each other. Now I wanna show how they're related to art. Simplest thing is that art is a form of knowledge. So everything about epistemology applies to art. But art needs to be split into two different things. You have art creation and art appreciation. They're two separate categories of things, but they're extremely similar. Let's look first at creation. Art creation being a form of epistemology. If you want to create new art that is beautiful, you need to do it in the form of conjecture and refutation, which is another way of saying the same thing I said earlier, guessing and checking, which is also very similar to variation and selection. It's all the same thing. The same applies to appreciating art. In order to appreciate art, you have to guess it in your mind. You have to create it in your mind in this way. It's called a conjecture. You have to just make it in your mind, but you don't make it exactly. But every time you experience a work of art, you have to make it in your mind, and then you have to criticize it in the mind. So that means that even from the perspective of a person who is the audience member, from the perspective of appreciating art, you're actually creating the work of art in your mind every single time. So the person who is appreciating the work of art is always an art creator, and they're also always criticizing. If they're appreciating the work of art in any artistic way, they're criticizing it. You create it and you criticize it. That means that any failure of appreciation is really a failure of knowledge from the person who is appreciating. They don't know how to appreciate all forms of art. They haven't learned how to appreciate certain forms of art. And that's kind of a common thing. People just don't understand how to make or how to appreciate art. They're not really taught how to appreciate art. I had a situation where I went to the Sydney Opera House with a couple friends of mine, and we listened to a symphony. And it was a great symphony. But there was a part of the symphony where there was offstage orchestra playing. Now, the people I went with don't know anything about symphonies. They didn't know how that goes. And I guess they also don't know a lot about like classical music in generally. Every time I go to the symphony, I listen to recordings of what I want to hear, like of the symphony that I'm going to, before going to it. And I'm very aware of what's about to happen. I also just listen to the symphony. I listen to classical music a lot, so I know about it. So I hear the off stage orchestra, and I understand what's going on. I understand it's a part of the music. But my friends who don't know anything about classical music, they hear off stage orchestra and they think that there is another orchestra playing unrelated to what we're listening to, and they think that it is distracting. They were like annoyed that there wasn't enough insulation between where we were listening, where the other stage would have been. They just didn't understand. Like they and they were annoyed because it was like a prominent part of the piece. They were annoyed that there was music bleeding over from some other orchestra, and I had to tell them like they just misunderstood. They didn't have the knowledge, the requisite knowledge to understand how to listen to a symphony that had this weird technique of having an offstage orchestra. also playing alongside the on-stage orchestra. They just didn't know how to appreciate that. So that's just a lack of knowledge. That's just a lack of knowledge. That can be overcome if you know, if you just know. I guess this is the basics of it. If you know, you can overcome it. Imagine the tragedy of paying money, putting time and attention into appreciating a work of art, and just not knowing how to do it. It's like um, going to an expensive movie, planning for the night out, really amping it up, and then you go to the movie theater and stare at the projector. And then someone's like, the movie was overblown and I didn't understand anything. I couldn't see. It's because you're looking in the wrong direction. You don't know what to look at. You don't have the requisite knowledge for appreciating a movie. Uh, and that is the same for all works of art. Any lack of appreciation is due to a lack of knowledge. Any failure of appreciation is due to a lack of knowledge. Aesthetics in computation is an easy one because computation, all humans can compute anything that's possible to happen in the universe, multiverse, whatever. Aesthetic appreciation is a form of computation. So that means that humans have the capacity to appreciate anything aesthetically. You can see anything as beautiful. And you can also create new ways of seeing beauty in things. That's a little bit of a tangent. You can see anything as beautiful. That's the connection of aesthetics and computation. And also anything that anybody else appreciates as beautiful, you can appreciate as beautiful. And this implies something very special, that essentially all works of art, we're kind of stuck. I don't know if that's true. A lot of times people make art for the culture of yesterday, but they're not making art for the universal mind. And humans have the capability of universal computation. We can do any sort of computation. We can see beauty in anything, and we can find new ways of appreciating beauty in many ways, in infinite ways. And we don't make art for that. We make art for the culture of yesterday, as opposed to making it for a universal person, universal mind, universal computation. So that's just a consideration. We can do much better with how we create art, with how we appreciate love. The final thing I want to really talk about is art and physics. And the thing is, if you make art that is hard to vary, and the reason why it is hard to vary is because it is aligned with certain standards, and these standards are universal standards that are present within all of the universes, then you create a structure that is present across all of the universes. Because since it is hard to vary in all of the universes, they all converge towards the same thing. And when you have art that is converging towards this hard to vary thing that is based on standards that are present in all the universes, people can improve on them because the standards are some sort of abstract standard and the artwork is going to be presented in some physical form. So there's never going to be a complete overlap, which means that there can be infinite improvement. And you're going to have people, other people, or you or other people, and people does not need to be limited to human beings, can improve whatever your work of art is or aspects of your work of art infinitely. So your art can infinitely improve. And I forgot to mention this yesterday. This is actually very important. The crystals that are being constructed across the multiverse actually change the structure of the entire multiverse. It actually defines which parts of the multiverse can interfere with others. So it's really integral to any explanation of reality. So something as simple as creating a new way of appreciating art. This is different from creating art. It applies to creating art too, but something as simple as a new way of appreciating art, which is hard to vary, can change the structure of the multiverse. That's pretty much the entire thesis of this video, and I just forgot to mention it yesterday while recording. So that's it for all the relationships between aesthetics and the four strands. I didn't actually go into evolution because I don't really know a lot about it. So there's There's the error of Lamarck that kind of looms over everything. Lamarckism looms over everything. So watch out for Lamarckism. But beyond that, that's a major subject that I think needs to have a specific discussion about Lamarckism itself, how the error of Lamarck shows up in evolution, epistemology, and aesthetics. I think that's very important, but not something I can get into right now. And obviously, David Deutsch made a whole lecture about flowers and beauty standards in the biological world. So that is, of course, a relationship between aesthetics and evolution. Go watch that lecture. It's amazing. The reason why I'm here is because I watched that lecture. Okay, I was not interested in David Deutsch's work. I saw that lecture, and I was like, I was amazed. I swooned. My heart was pounding, and um, I fell for the guy. Okay, what can I say? I fell for the guy. So I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know what was going on, but I liked it. I liked it. So I had to buy the book, and I just jumped straight to chapter 14 about why flowers are beautiful. Didn't understand any of it. Did not understand a word of it. So I had to read the rest of the book. And now I accidentally just understand all of reality. What happened there? I don't know. I just interested in art. All right. I just want to know about art. Here we are. During this learning about David Deutsch's stuff, so I can try to understand these implications with art. In one of the podcasts, Naval asked David to explain all of the connections between each of the strands of the fabric of reality, and they get distracted very quickly, so they don't go through any of it. They don't go through any of it. Here we are. That's why we're here right now, because fuck it, I can try it. I don't know. I'm familiar with the work for a couple weeks, couple days. I don't know, a couple hours. I just read the book. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
That is the cosmic significance of art. Do tell me if I got anything wrong.